What if one of the greatest mysteries of human history has been in front of us all along, frozen, hidden, and disguised by nature itself? Imagine this. Thousands of years ago, a civilization flourished with knowledge so advanced that it defied explanation. Their cities gleamed with stone and crystal, their towers stretched into the sky, and their ships navigated the oceans long before recorded history began. Then, in a sudden cataclysm, their world vanished. Plato told us this civilization was Atlantis. Generations of explorers, philosophers, and dreamers imagined it as a city swallowed by the sea. But what if Plato's account was only partly right? What if Atlantis didn't sink beneath the waves, but was buried under an endless sheet of ice, waiting to be rediscovered at the bottom of the earth? The story you are about to hear challenges everything you think you know about history. Over 2,000 years ago, the Greek philosopher Plato recorded a tale he claimed came from ancient Egyptian priests. It was the story of a lost land beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the Strait of Gibraltar, that rivaled the greatest empires of its time. Atlantis, he said, was larger than Libya and Asia combined, ruled by kings descended from the god Poseidon himself. It possessed immense power, incredible knowledge, and technology beyond comprehension. Plato described how Atlantis waged war against the known world, only to be struck down by natural disasters, in a single day and night of misfortune. His words painted a picture of a civilization swallowed by the ocean, lost forever. But here is where the mystery deepens. Some modern researchers suggest that Atlantis may not lie at the bottom of the Atlantic at all. Instead, its real location could be Antarctica, the frozen continent at the Earth's southern pole. Beneath Antarctica's miles of ice lies a hidden landscape of mountains, valleys, rivers, and even entire lakes. What if this ice-covered land is not just a barren wasteland, but the tomb of an ancient civilization? In this journey, we will explore forbidden maps that should not exist, like the Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513, which appears to show Antarctica's coastline centuries before it was officially discovered. We will trace myths from around the world that echo Plato's story, legends of floods and golden ages destroyed in fire and water. We will examine controversial expeditions to Antarctica that remain shrouded in secrecy, and strange reports of structures beneath the ice. For centuries, whispers of hidden knowledge have circulated among explorers, scholars, and even governments. Many dismiss these as conspiracy theories. But what happens when the myths align with science? What happens when ancient accounts, geological evidence, and suppressed documents point to the same conclusion, that our history is not what we've been told? By the end of this story, you may never look at the icy continent of Antarctica the same way again. To understand the possible fate of Atlantis, we must look back to a cataclysm that shaped the entire planet, the Younger Dryas event. Around 12,000 years ago, Earth underwent a sudden and violent shift in climate. In a geological blink of an eye, temperatures plummeted, ice sheets surged, and massive floods swept across continents. Some scientists argue this was triggered by a comet impact, while others suggest volcanic eruptions or sudden disruptions of ocean currents. Whatever the cause, the result was catastrophic. Entire ecosystems collapsed, megafauna went extinct, and human cultures were forced into survival. Archaeological evidence shows abrupt breaks in human development during this time. Could this have been the single day and night of misfortune Plato described? Could Atlantis have been destroyed not by myth, but by this very real global disaster? If so, then the memory of Atlantis may not be a fable. It may be a record of human survival through one of the darkest chapters in Earth's history. We often think of history as a straight line, progress beginning with primitive hunter-gatherers, leading slowly to the rise of cities, agriculture, and modern civilization. But what if this is only part of the truth? What if there were advanced cultures before Mesopotamia and Egypt, civilizations erased by cataclysms, their ruins hidden beneath the seas and the ice? Mainstream archaeology rejects the idea of Atlantis because it does not fit neatly into the established timeline. Yet discoveries like Göbekli Tepe, a massive temple complex built over 11,000 years ago, prove that humans at the end of the Ice Age were capable of achievements far beyond what we once believed. If Göbekli Tepe could exist, what else might lie hidden, waiting to be rediscovered? This is the guiding question of our journey. Is Antarctica the true resting place of Atlantis, and if so, what does that mean for the story of humanity? Our journey begins with the words of Plato himself, the philosopher whose writings shaped the very foundation of Western thought. Around 360 BCE, in his works Timaeus and Critias, Plato introduced the world to the story of Atlantis. He presented it not as a parable or a metaphor, but as an account passed down through generations, originating from the Egyptian priests of Sais, who claimed to have preserved the memory of a great catastrophe. According to Plato, Atlantis was a mighty empire located beyond the Pillars of Hercules. This was the ancient term for the Strait of Gibraltar, the narrow passage separating the Mediterranean Sea from the Atlantic Ocean. Atlantis, he said, was vast, larger than Libya and Asia combined. Its kings commanded immense wealth, extraordinary knowledge, and unrivaled naval power. Their capital city was laid out in concentric circles of land and water, a marvel of design and engineering. For Plato, Atlantis was not merely an invention to entertain his students. He insisted it was a true story. His words carried authority, and yet, even in his own time, some questioned whether Atlantis was history or allegory. Plato's details were tantalizing. He described grand temples covered in orichalcum, a mysterious metal, shining like fire. He spoke of canals stretching across the land, aqueducts, and harbors bustling with trade. The Atlanteans had mastered agriculture, architecture, and maritime power to a degree unmatched by any known ancient culture. But perhaps most provocative was the sense that Atlantis had achieved a level of sophistication that rivaled, or even surpassed, the civilizations that came millennia later. Plato's Atlantis was not a primitive tribe, it was a world power. Its rulers controlled resources across continents, their influence reaching as far as Egypt, Italy, and beyond. Some researchers argue that Plato was describing a civilization from the deep past, long before recorded history, a memory preserved through myth and oral tradition. If so, then Atlantis challenges the linear story of human progress, suggesting that advanced societies may have risen and fallen long before Mesopotamia and Egypt. For centuries, scholars debated whether Plato's Atlantis was real. Some saw it as a moral tale, a warning against hubris, wealth, and imperial overreach. In this view, Atlantis was not a historical record but a philosophical parable, a civilization destroyed because it grew corrupt and arrogant. Yet others argue that Plato's account was too specific, too detailed to be pure allegory. The dimensions of the island, the names of kings, the description of its laws and geography. Why would a philosopher include so many precise details if he only meant to tell a fable? Plato himself emphasized that the story came from ancient Egyptian records, translated by the lawmaker Solon centuries earlier. Could it be that Plato was preserving the faint memory of a real catastrophe, an event that shaped humanity long before the rise of Greece? If so, then Atlantis may represent the lost chapter of human history, a chapter erased by cataclysm, preserved only in fragments of myth. Now comes the most intriguing part. Plato placed Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which traditionally points to the Atlantic Ocean. For generations, this led explorers to search in the mid-Atlantic, imagining a sunken island somewhere between Europe and America. Yet geology shows no evidence of a massive continent sinking beneath those waters. But what if the key is not in the Atlantic at all? What if Atlantis lies much farther south, at the edge of the world we rarely consider? Beneath Antarctica's thick ice sheet lies a landmass larger than Europe. Modern science tells us that Antarctica was not always frozen. Millions of years ago, It was a lush, temperate land filled with forests and rivers. Even as recently as 12,000 years ago, the climate was drastically different. Ice cores and sediment samples reveal periods when parts of Antarctica were surprisingly warm. Now recall Plato's description: a vast land larger than Libya and Asia, filled with fertile plains, ringed by mountains, and surrounded by sea. When we strip away the ice in our imagination, Antarctica begins to fit the profile. The vast central plateau, the mountainous coastlines, the fertile valleys that once flourished. It is as if Plato's words echo the hidden continent beneath the ice. Plato was not the only source of a story about a great civilization destroyed by water. The Egyptian priests who allegedly passed the tale to Solon spoke of floods that had swept the earth, erasing knowledge and culture. The Sumerians told of the flood in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where Utnapishtim survived in a great boat. The Hebrew Bible echoed this with the story of Noah. Across the world, from Native American tribes to ancient Indian texts like the Mahabharata, myths of catastrophic floods abound. Could these stories all be fragmented memories of the same event, the Younger Dryas cataclysm that struck the earth around 12,000 years ago? If so, then Atlantis might not be a singular legend but part of a global pattern of forgotten civilizations. Egypt itself plays a critical role in this puzzle. The priests who informed Solon claimed that their own history stretched back thousands of years before Greece. They spoke of earlier cycles of humanity, civilizations that rose, fell, and vanished. For them, Atlantis was not myth, but memory. And when we look at Mesopotamian records of lost cities, vanished empires, and divine floods, we begin to see the same echoes. What if all of these cultures were remembering the same lost age? What if the story of Atlantis was not confined to Greece, but was a universal memory of a time before the ice, when Antarctica may have been a thriving land, home to a civilization now forgotten? When we think of Antarctica today, we imagine an endless wasteland of ice, howling winds, blizzards that never cease, and a barren landscape where only penguins and seals survive along the fringes. But this frozen desert hides one of the greatest enigmas of our planet. Beneath its ice sheet, which in some places is more than 2 miles thick, lies an entire continent larger than Europe. We know shockingly little about this hidden land. Only a fraction of Antarctica's surface has been directly explored, and the vast majority of its subglacial mountains, valleys, and rivers remain completely unknown. Modern satellites have revealed jagged peaks buried under ice, mountain ranges that rival the Alps, and networks of freshwater lakes sealed off for millions of years. Why is so much of this continent off-limits? Scientific research stations dot the edges, but access to its interior is heavily restricted. International treaties limit what can and cannot be done there. To some, this is simply for environmental protection. To others, it raises an unsettling question: what is Antarctica hiding? Antarctica has not always been a frozen wasteland. Geological studies and ice core samples reveal that, millions of years ago, the continent was lush and green. Fossilized plant remains, even traces of subtropical forests, have been discovered beneath the ice. Dinosaurs once roamed its valleys. More recently, during the last interglacial period, parts of Antarctica may have been ice-free and temperate. But here is where the timeline becomes intriguing. Around 12,000 years ago, the same time frame Plato gives for the fall of Atlantis, the world was coming out of the Ice Age. Temperatures shifted dramatically, seas rose, and vast regions were swallowed by ice or water. Some scientists argue that parts of Antarctica's coastlines could have been habitable, even fertile, just before this sudden freeze. If true, it means that human beings, if advanced enough, could have lived there. Imagine fertile plains where today there is only ice, rivers that once carved through valleys now buried, and cities built on land that no longer sees the sun. If such a civilization once thrived, the advancing glaciers would have entombed its remains perfectly, preserving them beneath a frozen tomb that we are only now beginning to unlock. One of the most controversial pieces of evidence often cited in this mystery is a map drawn in 1513 by the Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis. This map, discovered in Istanbul in 1929, shows parts of South America, Africa, and what appears to be the northern coastline of Antarctica, centuries before the continent was officially discovered. What makes the map extraordinary is not just its age, but its detail. The coastline of Antarctica depicted on the map appears to be free of ice, matching modern sonar studies of the subglacial terrain. In other words, the map seems to show what Antarctica looked like thousands of years ago, not what it looks like today. How could a 16th-century cartographer have drawn such a map? Piri Reis himself claimed he based it on ancient sources, maps he had copied from older civilizations. This suggests that someone, long before Columbus or Magellan, possessed knowledge of Antarctica and its true geography. Could those ancient mapmakers have been survivors or inheritors of the Atlantean tradition? Mainstream historians dismiss the Piri Reis map as coincidence or misinterpretation, but the accuracy of its Antarctic coastline continues to spark debate. If genuine, it points to a shocking conclusion. Advanced seafaring civilizations may have explored Antarctica thousands of years before modern history began. Modern science has begun to confirm that Antarctica is anything but a lifeless desert. Beneath the ice, researchers have discovered vast networks of freshwater lakes, rivers, and even signs of microbial life. Lake Vostok, buried under 2 miles of ice, has been sealed off for millions of years, creating an ecosystem untouched by the outside world. Drilling missions into these lakes have raised as many questions as answers. Microbes found in these waters suggest that life can survive under extreme conditions. But what else could be hidden there? Could traces of more complex life forms, or even ancient ruins, be waiting to be discovered? Satellite imaging has also revealed strange formations beneath the ice, geometric shapes and anomalies that some claim resemble artificial structures. While skeptics insist these are simply natural features, the possibility lingers. What if they are the remnants of a civilization buried by time? Antarctica's hidden world remains almost entirely unexplored. Scientists admit that we have mapped the surface of Mars more thoroughly than the land beneath Antarctica's ice. For a continent this vast, that ignorance itself is suspicious. In 1946, shortly after World War II, the United States launched one of the largest expeditions ever to Antarctica. Known as Operation High Jump, it involved 13 ships, 23 aircraft, and over 4,000 personnel. Officially, the mission was for training and research, but rumors quickly spread about what was really discovered there. Some reports claim that the expedition encountered strange phenomena, unexplained aircraft, lights in the sky, and even advanced technology buried in the ice. Admiral Richard Byrd, the leader of the mission, made cryptic statements upon returning, suggesting that the polar regions were the center of a new threat to world security. Whether these accounts are exaggerated or not, Operation High Jump remains one of the most mysterious episodes in Antarctic exploration. Why did such a massive military force need to explore a supposedly barren wasteland? And why, after only a few months, was the operation abruptly terminated? Conspiracy theories claim that secret discoveries were made, perhaps evidence of ancient structures, or even remnants of a forgotten civilization. Others argue that Byrd's statements referred to the geopolitical tensions of the Cold War. But the secrecy surrounding the mission, combined with the restricted access to Antarctica today, fuels suspicions that something extraordinary lies hidden under the ice. Across the world, scattered across continents and islands, lie the colossal remains of megalithic structures, monuments so massive and precise that they defy simple explanation. From the towering stones of Baalbek in Lebanon to the Cyclopean walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, from the Moai statues of Easter Island to the enigmatic stone circles of Nabta Playa in Egypt's desert, these works of ancient engineering echo one another in ways that are difficult to ignore. The common thread is scale. Many of these stones weigh hundreds of tons, some so large that even our modern cranes struggle to move them. Yet somehow ancient builders cut, transported, and placed them with uncanny precision. At Baalbek, the stone of the pregnant woman lies in a quarry weighing over 1,000 tons, heavier than the heaviest block used in the Great Pyramid. In South America, walls of stone fit so perfectly together that not even a blade of grass can slip between them. What unites these sites is not only their size, but their similarity. Despite oceans between them, many share the same polygonal masonry style, the same astronomical alignments, and the same mysterious origins. Archaeology dates them to different eras, yet local legends often claim they were built by gods, giants, or an advanced race that came before. Could these be echoes of a single, global civilization, an Atlantean legacy scattered across the world? Nowhere is the enigma of ancient engineering more concentrated than in the Great Pyramid of Giza. Officially, it is said to have been built around 2500 BCE as a tomb for Pharaoh Khufu. Yet no inscriptions naming Khufu exist inside the structure, no mummies have ever been found within, and its architectural sophistication far exceeds what would be expected for a mere burial site. The pyramid's alignment is astonishing. It is oriented almost perfectly to true north, with a margin of error so small that only modern surveying instruments can detect it. Its base is nearly a perfect square, and its dimensions encode mathematical relationships connected to the Earth's size and the ratio of pi. Some researchers suggest the pyramid is less a tomb and more a repository of knowledge, a monument built to withstand the ages, preserving secrets for future generations. Even more compelling is its connection to the stars. The pyramid's shafts align with Orion's belt and the star Sirius, central figures in Egyptian cosmology. Was this precision the work of Egyptians alone, or were they inheritors of knowledge from an older civilization? If survivors from Atlantis reached Egypt, the Great Pyramid may represent the crystallization of Atlantean science, preserved in stone. When we look closer at these megalithic wonders, a pattern emerges: engineering knowledge that seems out of place for its time. Ancient builders supposedly worked with copper chisels and stone hammers, yet they shaped granite, basalt, and diorite, rocks so hard that even modern diamond-tipped tools struggle to cut them. At sites like Puma Punku in Bolivia, blocks of andesite were carved with machine-like precision, featuring right angles and interlocking designs as if mass-produced. How can this be reconciled with the idea of primitive Stone Age societies? Traditional explanations strain under the evidence. The idea that hundreds of tons of stone were dragged for miles using ropes and wooden sledges may work on paper, but when tested in practice, it falls short. The logistics, manpower, and sheer ingenuity required suggest either technologies now lost to us or knowledge passed down from an advanced source. If Atlantis was real, perhaps it was this source. Survivors could have carried fragments of their engineering traditions to far corners of the globe, where local cultures preserved them in stone. Over time, the techniques were forgotten, leaving behind monuments that now appear impossible. What we see as miracles of ancient construction may, in fact, be the scattered fingerprints of a lost civilization. Beyond stonework, there are hints of technologies that seem anachronistic. Ancient texts speak of machines powered by mysterious forces, of knowledge of the stars far beyond what primitive tools should have allowed. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a shipwreck off Greece, is a bronze device over 2,000 years old that functioned as an astronomical computer. If such sophistication existed in known history, how much greater could have been achieved in the forgotten epochs? Legends from India speak of Vimanas, flying machines powered by unknown energies. In Egypt, carvings in Dendra depict what some interpret as electrical devices. The Nazca lines in Peru stretch across deserts in patterns that resemble runways or astronomical calendars. All of these raise a question: were these simply the products of local culture's ingenuity, or are they echoes of a once unified knowledge system? Navigation, too, is striking. How did Polynesian explorers cross thousands of miles of open ocean with pinpoint accuracy? How did ancient maps chart coastlines they should not have known? These skills point to advanced astronomy and seafaring far older than our history books suggest. If Atlantis was the hub of such knowledge, then its destruction scattered technologies that lingered in fragments across the world. All these anomalies, colossal stones, perfect alignments, mysterious technologies, converge on a single possibility: they may not be independent marvels, but remnants of a shared origin. Plato described Atlantis as possessing great knowledge, a mastery of engineering, and the ability to influence distant lands. Could the ruins we marvel at today be the faint echoes of this civilization's reach? When Atlantis fell, whether through flood, fire, or ice, its survivors may have carried what knowledge they could. They may have settled in Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Andes, or the islands of the Pacific. There, they taught fragments of their wisdom: how to cut stone, how to read the stars, how to measure the earth itself. But over generations, this knowledge eroded, mythologized into stories of gods and giants. The science of Atlantis became the mythology of its children. And so, when we gaze upon the Great Pyramid, or the Cyclopean walls of Peru, or the maps that should not exist, perhaps we are not seeing isolated miracles. Perhaps we are glimpsing the scattered shards of a once great civilization, a civilization whose heart may still lie buried under the ice of Antarctica. Antarctica is unlike any other place on Earth, not only in its landscape but also in the way it is governed. While every other continent is divided into nations, claimed and fought over, Antarctica is controlled by an international treaty. Signed in 1959, the Antarctic Treaty prohibits military activity, mineral mining, and nuclear testing. It allows only scientific research, and even that is tightly regulated. At first glance, this sounds noble, a pristine wilderness preserved for peace and science. But to skeptics, it is suspicious. Why is humanity barred from freely exploring such a vast landmass? Why is it that the most resource-hungry nations on Earth suddenly agreed to leave untouched a continent filled with untapped riches: oil, coal, precious minerals, and fresh water? Access to Antarctica's interior is extremely limited. Expeditions are costly, dangerous, and require permission that is rarely granted outside of approved scientific missions. Tourists may visit small coastal areas under strict supervision, but the heart of the continent remains forbidden. It is as if a curtain has been drawn across the land, preventing outsiders from seeing what lies within. Could it be that Antarctica's true secret is not environmental protection, but the preservation of something ancient, something humanity is not yet ready to face? Over the past 2 decades, startling images have circulated online and in fringe research communities. Photographs and satellite images that appear to show pyramidal mountains rising from the Antarctic ice. Some dismiss them as natural formations, yet their symmetry and angles are uncanny, resembling the pyramids of Egypt or Mesoamerica. If these shapes are truly artificial, they would be among the largest monuments ever constructed, monoliths frozen for thousands of years. Explorers and whistleblowers have claimed that expeditions have uncovered entrances, tunnels, and even vast caverns beneath these icy pyramids. According to these accounts, structures lie hidden far below, preserved perfectly by the frozen environment. While mainstream scientists remain silent or dismissive, the fascination grows. Why are pyramidal forms repeated across the world? Egypt, Mexico, China, Bosnia, and now Antarctica. Could they all share a common origin, a universal blueprint passed down from a forgotten civilization? If pyramids exist under Antarctica's ice, they would be the ultimate confirmation of Plato's tale. Atlantis was not destroyed, it was entombed, its monuments still standing, waiting for the ice to melt or for brave explorers to uncover them. Adding to the enigma are the persistent legends of Nazi expeditions to Antarctica in the 1930s and 1940s. According to historical records, Nazi Germany launched expeditions to claim territory in Queen Maud Land, which they named Neuschwabenland. Officially, these missions were for whaling and exploration. But rumors quickly grew of something far more secretive. Conspiracy theories claim the Nazis believed Antarctica hid ancient knowledge or even the remnants of a lost civilization. Some accounts suggest they established bases beneath the ice, where they experimented with advanced technologies. After World War II, these stories merged with tales of flying saucers and hidden fortresses, feeding speculation that Antarctica was the site of discoveries that the world was never told about. While many of these claims remain unverified, they continue to fuel suspicion. Why would the Nazis, obsessed with mythology and the occult, show such interest in Antarctica? Did they stumble upon something extraordinary? Ruins, artifacts, or technologies left behind by an earlier civilization? The connection between Nazis, hidden knowledge, and Antarctica deepens the sense that the frozen continent guards a secret beyond imagination. After World War II, the United States launched the massive Operation High Jump in 1946 to 1947, led by Admiral Richard Byrd. With over 4,000 men, dozens of aircraft, and a naval fleet, it was one of the largest expeditions ever mounted in Antarctica. Officially, the mission was for training and mapping, yet its scale and secrecy have long puzzled researchers. The expedition ended abruptly after only a few months, far shorter than the planned duration. Byrd returned to the United States and gave interviews that only deepened the mystery. He spoke of a threat from pole to pole, and of aircraft capable of flying incredible distances. Some interpreted his words as warnings of advanced technology, possibly not of human origin. What did Byrd see? What forced the sudden end of the mission? Official histories remain vague, while speculation has flourished. Some claim that Operation High Jump encountered remnants of Nazi installations. Others suggest Byrd's fleet stumbled upon evidence of ancient ruins, or even strange craft hidden beneath the ice. Whatever the truth, Operation High Jump stands as one of the most mysterious episodes in Antarctic exploration, a mission that raised more questions than it answered. Since Operation High Jump, rumors of hidden bases in Antarctica have multiplied. Whistleblowers, former military personnel, and fringe researchers have claimed that secret facilities exist deep beneath the ice, built around ancient ruins or alien technologies. According to some, these bases are multinational efforts, guarded from the public eye, where discoveries are studied in secrecy. Stories circulate of vast caverns warmed by geothermal heat, capable of housing entire cities. Others claim that ancient structures, pyramids, temples, or energy generators, lie buried in these subterranean spaces. Some even suggest that advanced beings, whether Atlantean survivors or extraterrestrials, may have once used Antarctica as a stronghold. Though mainstream science rejects these ideas, the consistent theme of hidden knowledge fuels public fascination. Why does Antarctica inspire so many tales of secrecy? Perhaps because it is the one place on Earth where vast regions remain unseen, untouched, and unexplored. If Atlantis truly lies beneath the ice, then the secrecy and conspiracies are not just fantasy. They are the smoke hiding a fire that has burned quietly for millennia. In the sagas of the Norse, we find stories that echo strangely with the idea of civilizations lost to ice. The Vikings spoke of Ginnungagap, a yawning void of fire and ice that existed before the creation of the world. Out of this frozen chaos came life, giants, and gods. Later, they told of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, when fire and ice would once again swallow the world, plunging it into darkness before it was reborn. These myths, woven into the fabric of Norse culture, may be more than just tales of gods and warriors. They may preserve dim memories of real climatic upheavals, of lands swallowed by ice, of golden ages that ended in catastrophe. For a seafaring people like the Norse, stories of distant frozen realms may not have been pure imagination but the cultural echo of knowledge passed down from far older times. Could it be that the myths of Ginnungagap and Ragnarok are distorted memories of a world where great civilizations thrived before the onset of a sudden ice age? If so, then perhaps the Norse, like the Greeks and Egyptians, were keepers of fragments of the Atlantean memory, telling of paradise lost beneath the frost. Travel across the Atlantic to the Americas, and you will find the same pattern. Native American tribes, from the Inuit of the Arctic to the Hopi of the deserts, share myths of floods and frozen lands. The Inuit tell stories of great upheavals in ice and snow, of lands that once were warm and fertile but were swallowed by cold. The Hopi speak of previous worlds destroyed by fire and water, with survivors carried into the next age. Among the Cree, there are tales of a time when the earth tilted, bringing sudden winters that buried entire regions. The Choctaw tell of a great flood that destroyed an ancient race of giants. Even the Mayans, in their Popol Vuh, describe cycles of creation and destruction, with earlier civilizations wiped out by catastrophe. These stories suggest a cultural memory stretching back thousands of years, describing not only floods but also sudden freezes. Could these myths be the voices of survivors, retelling the same global cataclysm remembered in Plato's dialogues? If Antarctica once held a thriving civilization, then its destruction by ice may be preserved in the oral traditions of peoples who inherited fragments of that forgotten past. Egypt, the land of pyramids and pharaohs, also holds tantalizing clues. Long before the dynasties of the Old Kingdom, Egyptian priests spoke of earlier rulers, semi-divine beings known as the Shemsu-Hor, or followers of Horus. Ancient king lists, such as the Palermo stone and the Turin papyrus, extend Egypt's history far beyond what conventional timelines allow, describing thousands of years of kingship before the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. The priests told Solon that Egypt preserved the memory of floods and lost civilizations because their land was spared from the worst disasters. While other cultures were destroyed, Egypt endured, becoming a library of human memory. Could it be that survivors from Atlantis carried their wisdom to the Nile Valley, where it was enshrined in myth, architecture, and secret teachings? Even the Great Sphinx, weathered by deep erosion patterns, may be a remnant of this earlier age, built long before the dynasties, preserved as a silent witness to a forgotten chapter of history. If true, then Egypt was not the birthplace of civilization but one of its inheritors, a guardian of Atlantean knowledge. In the ancient texts of India, we encounter another vision of lost world. Hindu cosmology speaks of yugas, vast cycles of time in which civilizations rise, flourish, and are destroyed. According to this worldview, humanity has already lived through multiple ages, each ending in catastrophe. Some are consumed by fire, others by floods, others by the slow erosion of virtue and knowledge. The story of Manu, the first man, is particularly striking. Warned by a divine fish of an impending flood, Manu built a boat to preserve life and knowledge. After the deluge, he repopulated the world. This story mirrors the accounts of Noah, Utnapishtim, and Deucalion, yet it comes from a completely different cultural and geographical context. Hindu texts also speak of advanced technologies and celestial weapons, described in terms that sound eerily modern, flying machines called vimanas, weapons of fire brighter than the sun. Are these poetic metaphors, or echoes of a civilization that truly possessed advanced knowledge, only to lose it in one of these cyclical destructions? If Atlantis was real, then perhaps it was one of the great civilizations of a previous age, destroyed in a cycle humanity barely remembers. Its memory survives not in ruins alone, but in the myths of India, where the rise and fall of worlds is part of a cosmic rhythm. Beyond myth and religion, the legend of Atlantis has also lived on in esoteric traditions and secret teachings. Theosophists of the 19th and 20th centuries, such as Helena Blavatsky, spoke of Atlantis as a real continent, home to a spiritually advanced race. Occult societies described Atlantis as a place where science and spirituality were united, where humanity reached its peak before falling into corruption. Even earlier, Renaissance thinkers like Francis Bacon imagined a utopian New Atlantis, where knowledge was preserved and perfected. In these visions, Atlantis was not simply a lost city but a symbol of hidden wisdom, waiting to be rediscovered by those worthy of it. Why has Atlantis persisted so powerfully in human imagination? Perhaps because it resonates with something buried deep in our collective memory. Whether through myth, religion, or esoteric teaching, the idea of a lost golden age speaks to a truth. Humanity is older, more fragile, and more cyclical than we dare admit. If Antarctica is indeed Atlantis, then all these traditions, Norse, Native American, Egyptian, Hindu, and esoteric, are not fantasies but fragments of a single story. A story of a civilization that rose to greatness, was destroyed in fire and ice, and now lies entombed, waiting for us to uncover it. If we are to search for truth beneath the myths, science must be our guide. Antarctica is not silent. Its ice is a library, preserving the story of Earth's climate across hundreds of thousands of years. Scientists drill deep into the ice, extracting cores that contain trapped bubbles of ancient air. These samples allow us to reconstruct temperature shifts, atmospheric composition, even evidence of volcanic eruptions and cosmic events. The results are astonishing. Ice cores reveal sudden spikes and drops in temperature, violent disruptions in climate, and evidence of cataclysmic events. Around 12,800 years ago, the exact time Plato places the destruction of Atlantis, the cores show massive changes. There are layers of soot, suggesting global wildfires. There are signs of dust and ash, perhaps from volcanic eruptions or impact. This is no slow evolution of climate. It is a dramatic upheaval. Entire ecosystems collapse. Sea levels surge. Humanity was forced to adapt or die. If a civilization had flourished in Antarctica before this shift, the ice would have closed over it, preserving the remains in frozen silence. The cores themselves hint at the violence of the transition, proof, perhaps, that the day and night of misfortune was more than just myth. One of the most puzzling discoveries in Antarctic research is the speed at which climate change can occur. Ice cores reveal that in some periods, temperatures rose or fell by as much as 15 degrees Celsius in less than a decade. Imagine what that would mean for human societies. In a single generation, fertile lands could become deserts, rivers could dry up, and glaciers could surge across valleys. The Younger Dryas is the most famous of these cycles. A sudden plunge into icy conditions, followed by an equally abrupt warming. For years, scientists assumed climate change took thousands of years. Now they know it can happen almost overnight. This knowledge forces us to re-examine ancient myth. When cultures speak of worlds destroyed by fire and ice, they may not have been exaggerating. They may have been describing the lived experience of ancestors who saw the sky darken, the weather turn against them, and entire continents made uninhabitable in the span of their lifetime. For Atlantis, this is critical. If it existed in a habitable Antarctica, then one of these rapid shifts could have frozen it in place almost instantly. The warming and cooling cycles etched into the ice align with the story Plato preserved, a golden age wiped out in a sudden calamity. Skeptics argue that humanity 12,000 years ago was too primitive to chart the globe. But mounting evidence suggests otherwise. Ancient peoples were extraordinary navigators. The Polynesians crossed thousands of miles of open ocean using only the stars and waves. The Phoenicians may have circumnavigated Africa centuries before Europeans. Even the Norse reached North America long before Columbus. If such feats were possible in historical times, why not earlier? Especially if a civilization like Atlantis had mastered advanced astronomy and navigation. The maps of Pyre Reis and Orontius Phineus, showing Antarctica's coastline before ice, suggest that ancient seafarers not only reached the continent but surveyed it with astonishing accuracy. How did they accomplish this? Perhaps with knowledge of the stars, mathematics, and instruments now lost to us. The Antikythera mechanism proves that sophisticated technology existed in the ancient world. If such devices survived in fragments, who knows what greater tools once guided ships across uncharted seas. If Antarctica was indeed Atlantis, its people may have been the first global explorers, their maps and knowledge surviving in fragments that later cartographers inherited. The existence of accurate, pre-modern maps of Antarctica is a clue we cannot ignore. Within academia, Atlantis is dismissed as a fable. Historians argue that no credible archaeological evidence supports its existence. They point to the lack of ruins, artifacts, or inscriptions explicitly referencing Atlantis outside of Plato's dialogues. For them, the similarities between myths and geological events are coincidence, not proof. Yet this dismissal reveals a tension. How many times has science ridiculed ideas only to later confirm them? Troy was once thought a myth until Heinrich Schliemann unearthed its ruins. The idea of meteor impacts shaping Earth was once laughed at, now it is accepted fact. Even continental drift was dismissed as pseudoscience until plate tectonics proved it undeniable. The resistance to Atlantis may not be rooted in evidence, but in paradigm. Accepting Atlantis means accepting that human history is far older and more complex than we believe. It means rewriting textbooks, rethinking timelines, and admitting that myth may be memory. For many scholars, this is too disruptive. But outside the ivory towers, the evidence continues to accumulate, waiting for the day when skepticism can no longer hold it back. There is another layer to this story, one that speaks not to ignorance but to suppression. Researchers who propose controversial ideas often face ridicule, career damage, or outright censorship. Graham Hancock, for example, has long argued for a lost civilization destroyed around the end of the Ice Age. His theories have been dismissed as pseudoscience, yet many of the discoveries at sites like Göbekli Tepe align with his claims. Why such hostility? Because alternative theories threaten established authority. Archaeology and history are not just academic fields, they are cultural gatekeepers. If Atlantis were proven real, it would upend the foundations of human history. It would reveal that civilization is far older, that cycles of rise and fall are part of our nature, and that we are not as unique as we think. Suppression may not be a coordinated conspiracy, but a cultural inertia. Ideas that challenge the mainstream are pushed aside, funding denied, voices silenced. And yet, the whispers persist. Maps, myths, geological evidence, and forbidden ruins all point to a story too large to suppress forever. If Antarctica holds the key to Atlantis, then one day the ice will give up its secret. And when it does, the world will have to face the truth that history is far stranger and far older than we dared imagine. History, as it is usually told, presents a simple tale. A steady rise from primitive hunters to farmers, then cities, and finally the great empires we know today. Yet the deeper we dig into both the earth and our myths, the more this story unravels. The evidence points not to one linear ascent, but to cycles, worlds built, destroyed, and rebuilt. Consider the archaeological site of Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey. Dated to over 11,000 years ago, it predates agriculture, writing, and the wheel, yet it consists of massive stone pillars, carved with astonishing precision, arranged in complex ceremonial enclosures. For centuries, historians believed humans at that time were too primitive to build such structures. Göbekli Tepe forces us to ask, was this the work of survivors of an earlier, more advanced culture? Now multiply this anomaly by hundreds. Megaliths, underwater ruins, inexplicable maps, myths of floods and fires, all scattered across the globe. Could it be that whole civilizations have been erased by cataclysms, leaving only fragments of memory and stone behind? If so, Atlantis was not alone. It was one in a long line of civilizations wiped clean, leaving later humanity to start again in ignorance. The ice and fire of the Younger Dryas may have been only the latest reset in a cycle stretching back tens of thousands of years. If this is true, then our own world is not immune. Why does the idea of Atlantis provoke such resistance? Because it threatens the very framework of history as we know it. If a civilization older and more advanced than Egypt or Mesopotamia once existed, then the timelines taught in every classroom collapse. The notion that we are the pinnacle of human progress is shaken. History is not merely academic. It is political, cultural, and even existential. Nations build their identity on claims of being the cradle of civilization, the heirs of greatness. A lost world like Atlantis undermines all of that. It forces us to admit that we are inheritors, not originators, that our ancestors were not ignorant savages but custodians of a legacy we barely comprehend. This is why forbidden history is suppressed. It doesn't fit the story we want to tell ourselves. It demands humility, admitting that humanity has forgotten more than it remembers. And it whispers a truth that terrifies. If civilizations have risen and fallen before, then ours may someday meet the same fate. The ancients did not see history as linear. To them, time was cyclical. The Hindus spoke of yugas, the Greeks of ages of gold, silver, bronze, and iron. The Maya calculated vast cycles of creation and destruction. In every tradition, humanity rose to greatness only to fall into ruin, beginning the cycle anew. Modern science is beginning to confirm what myth has long told us. Catastrophic events, comet strikes, supervolcanoes, abrupt climate shifts, have reset the planet again and again. Species vanish, ecosystems collapse, and survivors rebuild in the aftermath. Why should human civilizations be any different? Atlantis, in this view, is not a unique tragedy but part of a natural rhythm. Civilizations bloom, achieve wonders, and are destroyed by forces beyond their control. Survivors carry fragments of memory into the next age, where myth and legend preserve them. Over time, we forget, and the cycle repeats. If Antarctica hides Atlantis, it is not just a lost city but a mirror, showing us the pattern of rise and fall that defines human history. If we accept that civilizations rise and fall in cycles, then Atlantis is only one chapter in a far greater story. Perhaps there were others before it, cultures now entirely erased, their ruins ground to dust, their knowledge lost to the sea. Atlantis may have been the last great power of the Ice Age, destroyed in the Younger Dryas cataclysm. After it fell, humanity entered a dark age, slowly rebuilding until Egypt, Sumer, and Greece emerged. Antarctica, then, becomes a symbol, not just of Atlantis, but of all lost worlds that lie buried beneath ice, water, or desert sands. If explorers ever uncover ruins beneath its glaciers, they may find not just the story of one civilization but evidence of humanity's forgotten cycles, proof that we are far older, far more complex than we realize. This view changes everything. It means our modern world is not the first to master engineering, astronomy, or seafaring. It means that the line from stone tools to skyscrapers is not a straight one, but a spiral, each turn bringing new heights, each collapse burying the past beneath myth. This brings us to the most unsettling question of all. If civilizations rise and fall in cycles, if cataclysms wipe clean the slate again and again, then what of us? Are we truly immune to the fate of Atlantis? Our modern world is dazzling. Satellites orbit the Earth, skyscrapers pierce the sky, and technology links billions in an invisible web. Yet we are also fragile. A single global catastrophe, whether nuclear war, asteroid impact, supervolcano eruption, or runaway climate change, could end our world in months. What would remain of us if the ice returned? Our cities might crumble, our knowledge vanish, and survivors might wander, telling myths of gods and machines to generations who would not believe. Future archaeologists might stumble upon the shattered remains of New York or Beijing, puzzling over how such wonders were built by a people who left no memory of themselves. Atlantis is not just a tale of the past. It is a warning. If Antarctica holds its ruins, they stand as a mirror to us, reminding us that even the greatest civilizations can fall in a single day and night of misfortune. Imagine standing before a glacier in Antarctica, its blue walls shimmering like frozen glass. Beneath your feet, under miles of ice, could lie not only the ruins of cities but the remnants of technologies that modern science can scarcely imagine. If Atlantis was a civilization of advanced engineers and explorers, then surely they left behind more than stone. Plato hinted that the Atlanteans possessed knowledge of engineering, navigation, and possibly even energy harnessing that surpassed his own world. What if deep within the frozen tunnels are machines built to generate power, devices that captured forces of nature we barely understand today? Could there be remnants of crystalline energy sources, forgotten metals, or even technologies for communication and healing? Skeptics scoff at such notions, but history reminds us of lost inventions that were once thought impossible. The Baghdad battery suggests ancient experimentation with electricity. The Antikythera mechanism shows mechanical computing centuries before its time. If such fragments survived from known history, what wonders might await us from a world thousands of years older? If we were to unearth such artifacts, the implications would be staggering. Not only would it prove Atlantis existed, it would also force us to admit that our technological journey is not unique. Others walked this path before us, only to be erased by ice and time. Our official history stretches back perhaps 6,000 years to the first known civilizations in Mesopotamia and Egypt. But what if that is merely the tip of the iceberg, literally? What if the true story of humanity lies locked beneath Antarctica's frozen crust? Under the ice are mountains, valleys, and rivers that once may have supported forests and fertile plains. If ruins exist there, they would rewrite everything we know. Instead of Mesopotamia being the cradle of civilization, we would discover that humanity's earliest great experiment in culture and science took place at the bottom of the world. The implications ripple outward. Myths of a lost golden age, stories of gods descending from the sky, legends of great floods, all could be memories of Atlantis, carried into Egypt, Sumer, India, and the Americas by survivors. Suddenly, the similarities among global myths would no longer be coincidence but fragments of a shared heritage. Humanity's story would no longer be one of linear progress from caves to cities. It would be a story of rise, fall, and rebirth, of cycles preserved in ice and rediscovered only when we are ready to face them. Antarctica could be the missing library of human memory, frozen for 12,000 years, waiting for us to read it. If such knowledge were discovered, the consequences would be revolutionary. Our science, powerful though it is, may be incomplete. Ancient peoples may have understood aspects of nature that we ignore or dismiss. Imagine energy sources that do not pollute, that draw from the earth or the cosmos itself. Imagine knowledge of astronomy so precise that it allowed ancient builders to align monuments with celestial bodies across millennia. Imagine technologies of construction that moved stones weighing hundreds of tons with effortless ease. Modern scientists would be forced to confront the possibility that our ancestors mastered sciences we are only beginning to rediscover. Perhaps they understood resonance, vibration, and frequency as tools for building. Perhaps they harnessed the Earth's electromagnetic fields. Perhaps they knew ways of sustaining societies in harmony with nature, knowledge that we desperately need in our age of ecological crisis. The rediscovery of Atlantean knowledge could spark a renaissance unlike any before. It could challenge our assumptions, advance our technologies, and perhaps even warn us against repeating the same mistakes that led to their downfall. For what use is knowledge without wisdom? There is another, darker possibility. What if the ruins of Atlantis have already been found, but kept secret? Conspiracy theories abound that governments, corporations, and hidden elites know more about Antarctica than they admit. Whistleblowers claim that expeditions have uncovered ruins, artifacts, even entire complexes beneath the ice, but that these discoveries are classified. Why would such knowledge be hidden? perhaps because it would upend the world order. If technology was uncovered that could provide free energy, industries built on oil and gas would collapse. If proof of Atlantis emerged, religions might face crises of faith, and nations might lose their carefully guarded historical narrative. History shows that powerful elites often suppress disruptive truth. Books banned, discoveries ridiculed, ideas buried. If Atlantis has been found beneath Antarctica, it would not be the first time knowledge was hidden from the masses. Perhaps one day the truth will emerge, not because it is revealed willingly, but because the ice itself yields what no one can deny. Finally, let us ask the most profound question. Could Antarctica, Atlantis frozen, be the true origin of all global myths? From the Greeks to the Egyptians, from the Hindus to the Maya, stories persist of a golden age destroyed by cataclysm. Floods, fires, and ice recur again and again. Survivors wander, bringing fragments of their culture to new lands. Gods are remembered not as divine beings but as rulers or teachers from a lost world. If Atlantis was Antarctica, then these myths align. Survivors carried their memories northward, scattering them into the fertile valleys of the Nile, the plains of Mesopotamia, the jungles of India, and the mountains of the Americas. Over time, memory became myth, and myth became legend. But the seed of truth remained. Every pyramid, every flood story, every tale of a lost age may trace back to one real place, a land now buried beneath ice, waiting to remind humanity of what it once was, and what it could be again. As we step back from the countless threads we've followed, a picture begins to emerge. Plato's account of Atlantis, written more than 2 millennia ago, aligns uncannily with what we know of Antarctica's hidden past. He described a land vast and powerful, struck down in a single cataclysmic event. Antarctica, beneath its thick ice, was once a temperate continent with fertile valleys and rivers. Around 12,000 years ago, it was plunged into ice during the Younger Dryas, a global cataclysm etched into geological records. We've seen maps, Pyri Reis, Orontius Phineas, Bwatch, that suggest someone charted Antarctica long before its discovery, perhaps when it was ice-free. We've seen global myths, from Egypt to India, from the Maya to the Norse, that described golden ages and floods eerily similar to Plato's story. We've seen megaliths and pyramids across the globe, their similarities hinting at a shared origin, perhaps the legacy of a single advanced culture. Antarctica, remote and forbidden, guarded by ice and international treaties, may be the final resting place of this civilization. Whether we call it Atlantis or by another name, the evidence whispers the same truth. Our history is older, more complex, and more cyclical than we dare admit. Plato did not tell the story of Atlantis only to fascinate. He told it to warn. Atlantis, he wrote, grew powerful, rich, and arrogant. Its people, once noble, became corrupted by greed and ambition. They sought to conquer and dominate, and in doing so, they brought about their downfall. This moral carries as much weight today as it did in ancient times. If Atlantis was real, its destruction was not just the result of natural catastrophe, but also of human arrogance. A civilization advanced in technology but weak in wisdom is doomed to collapse. And here lies the mirror held up to us. Our world today is dazzling in power. Satellites, nuclear energy, artificial intelligence. Yet we too are tempted by arrogance, by conquest, by the belief that our dominance over nature is permanent. If Atlantis truly lies beneath the Antarctic ice, then its frozen ruins are not only a mystery, they are a message that warns. No matter how great a civilization becomes, it can vanish in a single stroke of fate, especially if hubris blinds it to danger. Civilizations fall not only because of natural disaster but because they ignore the warnings written in their own histories. Flood myths, cycles of destruction, the memory of lost worlds, all of these are lessons left by our ancestors. They tried to tell us, we are not the first and we may not be the last. Yet modern society often dismisses myth as superstition, treating it as fantasy instead of memory. We look at ancient structures and assume primitiveness rather than acknowledging genius. We place ourselves at the peak of progress, blind to the fragility of our world. If we ignore the lessons of Atlantis, we risk repeating them. Environmental collapse, technological hubris, and the threat of sudden catastrophe all mirror the dangers faced by that lost civilization. By pretending our age is immune, we set ourselves on the same path. Perhaps the greatest tragedy would not be that Atlantis fell, but that we learned nothing from its fall. Some might ask, why does it matter if Atlantis was real? Why chase myths buried in ice? The answer is simple. Our future depends on it. Ancient history is not just a curiosity, it is a mirror of human potential and human fragility. If advanced civilizations have risen and fallen before, then so can ours. If they discovered technologies or ways of life that we have forgotten, rediscovering them could help us survive the crises we face today. History matters because it teaches us who we are. If we are the inheritors of lost ages, then we are not unique. We are part of a cycle stretching back into the mists of time. To ignore that is to live blindly, unaware of the patterns that shape our destiny. The ruins beneath the Antarctic ice, if they exist, would not only prove that Atlantis was real, they would prove that humanity's story is one of resilience, survival, and rebirth. And perhaps they would offer us the wisdom to break the cycle of destruction at last. As our journey draws toward its close, we are left with questions that haunt the imagination. What secrets are locked beneath Antarctica's ice? What ruins, what artifacts, what knowledge might be waiting to be found? Is there evidence of a civilization that thrived before history began, proof that myths are memories and legends are truths? The ice is not eternal. Already, climate change is melting glaciers, revealing landscapes unseen for thousands of years. One day, whether by human exploration or by nature's own hand, Antarctica may yield its secret. When it does, the world may be forced to rewrite history, not as a tale of steady progress, but as a saga of cycles, of worlds built and lost. Perhaps Atlantis is not the only truth buried there. Perhaps there are stories we cannot even imagine, waiting for the moment when humanity is ready to hear them. The ice holds silence now, but silence is not the same as emptiness. Beneath it may lie the greatest discovery of all time, the real story of humanity. Close your eyes and imagine a world that existed before the pyramids, before Mesopotamia, before writing itself. A world where humanity was not a scattered band of hunters and gatherers, but builders, explorers, and thinkers. Imagine vast cities rising from fertile plains now buried in ice, harbors filled with ships that sailed farther than our textbooks allow, and temples aligned perfectly to the stars. This was a world of mystery and mastery, erased by catastrophe but not by memory. Its echoes linger in myths of golden ages, in tales of gods who walked among men, and in ruins that defy our explanations. We call this world Atlantis, though perhaps it had another name, forgotten now, spoken only in whispers preserved in the ice. To imagine this world is to expand our understanding of what humanity can be. It is to admit that our story is not simple, that our greatness is not unique, and that we walk in the footsteps of ancestors who may have been as advanced, or more so, than we are today. Antarctica may be the greatest mystery, but it is not the only one. Across the globe, puzzles await us. The pyramids of Egypt, whose alignments and construction still baffle engineers. Sprawling ruins of South America, where walls of stone resist both explanation and time. The enigma of Tartaria, whispered in forgotten maps and erased from official history, suggesting entire empires hidden in plain sight. There are maps that should not exist, like the Piri Reis chart, pointing to knowledge older than recorded history. There are sunken ruins off the coasts of Japan, India, and the Caribbean, hinting at cities swallowed by rising seas. There are myths of lands that appear, vanish, and reappear across the ages, High Brazil, Lemuria, Mu. Each of these mysteries forms a constellation of clues. When connected, they point to the same truth. Humanity's story is older, richer, and stranger than we know. Atlantis, whether in Antarctica or elsewhere, is not an isolated legend but one star in a galaxy of forgotten worlds waiting to be rediscovered. The journey does not end here. If Atlantis lies beneath the Antarctic ice, then what else is hidden in the forgotten corners of the Earth? Future explorations may take us to the depths of the oceans, where drowned cities lie in silence. They may lead us to the deserts, where sands conceal ruins of empires erased from maps. They may even carry us to the stars, where myths of gods and celestial visitors may prove to be memories of encounters long ago. The questions are endless, and each one pulls us deeper into the labyrinth of human history. What was Tartaria? Why do pyramids appear across every continent? Who carved the megaliths of Baalbek, or built the astronomical city of Teotihuacan? And above all, how much of what we call myth is in fact forgotten memory? The answers may lie not only in ruins and maps but in our willingness to question, to imagine, and to seek beyond the boundaries of conventional history. The story of Atlantis and Antarctica is not just an ancient tale, it is a mystery that belongs to all of us, and the only way we uncover it is together. Each question, each discovery, each piece of evidence brings us closer to the truth. So, keep questioning. Do not accept history as a closed book. Share these stories, explore these mysteries, and keep the conversation alive. The more voices join in, the harder it becomes for the truth to be buried, whether under ice, water, or silence. If humanity is to rediscover its forgotten past, it will not be through the work of a few but through the curiosity of many. Every question you ask, every story you share, every step you take toward uncovering the unknown is part of this great journey. And so we arrive at the final thought, the one that lingers like a whisper in the frozen winds of the south. Perhaps Atlantis never sank at all. Perhaps it was not swallowed by the sea, but by the ice. Perhaps its cities, its monuments, its knowledge, and its warnings still lie there, silent and preserved, waiting for the day when humanity is ready to rediscover them. The ice will not keep its secrets forever. One day, the glaciers will retreat, and what has been hidden will come to light. When that day arrives, the myths will become history, and history will become revelation. We will see ourselves not as the beginning, but as the continuation of a story that stretches back into forgotten ages. Atlantis is not gone. It is waiting beneath Antarctica's eternal frost, patient, silent, and haunting. And when it awakens, the world will never be the same again.